Good afternoon, everybody. I'm mindful of the time, and Chairman of SBF has asked me to try to make up the lost time and to cut this short. So I will try to do this short. So what I'm going to do in the next 20 minutes or so is to share with you some of the mega trends that will shape the way that you drive your business forward, and how do you react to the changes and so on. So before we look at it, what really are mega trends? Mega trends are really patterns of movements that will have an impact on the economy as well as the society as a whole. And what we have done is that over the last couple of years, we have talked to many of our clients, and we come up with 5 trends that will be potentially disruptive to the economy, and therefore will have an impact on the way that you carry out your businesses. It may have an impact on your business model because of the environment that you're operating in has changed significantly. So what are these 5 business trends or mega trends? One is actually the demographic and social change. 2 is the shift in global economic power. 3, rapid urbanization, the city-states. Climate change and resource scarcity, as well as technology breakthrough. So let's look at each one of these mega trends, and more importantly, for you to reflect how this will have an impact on the way that you operate. So the first thing on the demographic and social change. By the time I finish this sentence, 145 babies will be added to this world. And in 2025, we have another billion people, adding it to about 8 billion. But that is not the problem. Not a problem because I'm mindful of some gray hairs here. The issue is that there will be a lot of over 65 as well. All right? But there's actually some opportunities here. One is that the consumption power of the growing population segments will be there. But unfortunately, the observation is that there's some sharp regional variation. So for example, Africa will double the population by 2050, while Europe is expected to shrink. So while the population as a whole increase, where it is increasing is different pace. The second thing on this change is that there will be 865 million women. They will be in the main economic mainstream. And so that will have an influence on society and on the purchasing power. There is also innovative potential of a fairly diverse workforce. And I think studies have shown that the more diverse your workforce is, will have an impact on the ability of the company to do well or not. But of course, earlier on, Nizam did talk about creativity, and that may actually have an impact on that as well. The other observation is that the number of people employed outside their home country has increased by 25% over the past decade. And we expect it to be 50% by 2020. And how Singaporeans operate as international managers, which is one of the points in the SPF paper, is something that we have looked at. I don't know about your experience. Our experience has been that less and less Singaporeans are willing to be relocated, partly because we are all very comfortable here. And so moving to a more diversified world, there is an increase in dependency ratio, there's a rising healthcare cost, and organizations will need to embrace an older and more experienced workforce. In France, they took a century for the workforce that is above 60 to double from 7% to 14%. So they took about 100 years in order for the workforce to embrace the 60s. China, India, and Brazil will have 3 decades to do so. So, the pressure is there. And of course, I talk about the female participation will increase as social changes see mothers having fewer children at a later stage of their life. Right, so that's the first mega trend on the population shift. The second is a shift in economic power. So many of you are aware of this. The aggregate purchasing power of the E7 emerging economies, the E7 will be the BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, as well as Turkey, Mexico, and Indonesia. They will overtake that of the G7 by 2030. And Asia Pacific will have a larger middle class than Europe and North America combined. So again, there's a shift of the consumption pattern. And the global emerging middle class will represent an annual market of some US 6 trillion by 2021. So the traditional way of classifying economies is becoming more and more irrelevant. And the economic shifts within these countries and also groupings within these countries will result in a momentous change in the consumption pattern. So there is a lot more diverse and demanding customer expectation. So these are things that we have to be mindful of. The ongoing rebalancing of the global economic power will also bring about major implications for investment in infrastructure. So you can see that the infrastructure spend is going to go up. The Asia Pacific market, driven by China, will represent nearly 60% of global infrastructure spending. All right. In contrast, Western Europe share will shrink to less than 10%, from twice as much as it was just a few years ago. So again, there is a greater demand on the infrastructure. So therefore, the global economic landscape in 10 years will be quite different because of both the scale and speed of these economic shifts. All right, so there are four implications that we look at. One is emerging markets will challenge developed economies in the production of high-end consumer durables. Today's Frontier 7, Bangladesh, Colombia, and so on and so forth, will become tomorrow's growth markets. We also suspect that an expanded pool of highly skilled talent will fuel this emergence, and people from the emerging markets may increasingly lead global multinationals. And developed countries will benefit from reshoring as wage differentials close. So, the low wage region may no longer be there. And so to prepare for this landscape change, I think businesses need to identify areas that can actually offer the greatest potential growth in view of some of these mega trends. So these are the first two mega trends. If I move on to the third one, and that is on rapid urbanization. In 1880, 2% of the world population stays in the cities. Today is 50%. And it is going to continue to rise. There are 1.5 million join the urban population either through migration or childbirth. And by 2025, there will be 40 cities with population over 10 million. And so the infrastructure spend on New York, Beijing, Shanghai, and London alone will need US 8 trillion. So this rapid expansion is putting a strain on the city's infrastructure, environment, as well as the social fabric. All right? 0.5% of the world's surface, the cities occupy 0.5% of the world's surface, but consume 75% of its resources. And so the expanding city population will demand rising investment in urban infrastructure, again putting a further strain on vital resources. So there's also need to rethink public spending as there's a strain on the cities, waste management, transport, and so on and so forth. And you can see cities being manufactured out of something. So the floating cities, the cave cities, and so on will be things to come. But with this, it comes with wider opportunities. And you can see that because of the lifestyle shaped by rising population density and readier access to resources, there's a demand for that. Businesses will need to refocus so that they can cater to such changes. And they need to leverage on technology to support the growth, building a smart nation, a smart city. Fourth mega trend is actually climate change and resource scarcity. The demand for energy and food will rise as the world becomes more populous, urbanized, and prosperous. But unfortunately, the natural resources are actually finite. And because of the development needs and so on, the dependence on fossil fuels will be there, and therefore may not be able to meet the limit of a rise of 2 degrees centigrade by 2034. And about half a century worth of oil remains now. So there are two extreme outcomes. One is a policy shock with a global agreement that severely penalizes carbon emissions. And so the Paris Agreement or protocol is a first step to that. The other possible outcome will be a climate or resource shock, where a natural event causes massive environmental and economic damage. Right? So it's either one of these two. And business need to rise above this, sustainability become vital. So an importantly, increasing important area is that business need to be able to measure and understand this. Having corporate social responsibility is no longer a luxury. It is an expectation. It is a business imperative. And therefore, it's important to actually understand how this is, how to actually have a credible and trustworthy way of communicating to the market, because consumers, workforce, society, and even investors will demand that you actually have a sustainable business. And so business will need to focus on sustainability, environmental protection, as well as food safety. The fifth mega trend is actually in relation to technological breakthroughs. And in our PwC Global CEO Survey, all the business leaders are telling us that technology is one of the biggest disruptive force in their organizations. Right? And so you can see that the technology breakthroughs, the internet that has created extraordinary value, social media has actually deepened the relationship that companies have with their end customers. One of the reasons why this is the case is that the speed of change is fast. The time taken to go from technology breakthrough to mass market application is actually collapsing. So in the US, it took 76 years for the telephone to reach half the population, but a smartphone only took 10 years. So it's narrowing, it's very short. And secondly, also the price of technology is getting low. All right, so you can see from this example, the DNA sequencing for genome has plunged from US 96 million in 2001 to 6,000 today. And so this technology or digital disruption is so pervasive that I don't think any businesses are spared. And so we predict three possible waves in the coming. So first of all, you will see that more companies, even the traditional ones, will have to adopt the e-commerce or add a web channel to the existing portfolio. So there's the first wave that many are in. The second wave, you'll see that we'll move beyond a channel to an economy of outcomes, with businesses working with consumers to develop solutions. So for example, companies that help us to lead healthier lifestyle. So having the Fitbit and so on and so forth. The third wave will be consumers taking back their digital identity and extracting value from it, expecting businesses to know what they want and to really deal with them as individuals. So across these successive waves, there are actually four areas that are intertwined. One is social, mobile, analytics, as well as cloud. Having a digital strategy is no longer enough. You need to have a business strategy that is relevant to the digital age. So these are the five mega trends, and at a glance they may seem big and long term, but really the impact and effects are actually immediate. And I think if you do not address it, you will regret. And the challenge and opportunity is not about looking at each of these mega trends, but really the interaction between them. And we see that when these few mega trends collide together, you will have something that you will need to deal with, and there will be cause more disruption to your businesses. A case in point is what we call a sharing economy, which is the collision of the mega trends. And what it means is that a lot of businesses, a lot of consumers are moving away from buying and owning to sharing or renting. There is more demand for access rather than ownership. Right? So you can see from this example, in the financial services, because of the crowdfunding and so on, that will have an impact on them. In the automotive industry, because of the car sharing, the Uber and so on and so forth, will have an impact. Music, Spotify and so on, will take away a lot of those traditional sources where you get music. And Airbnb is something that people love and hate. So these are the trends that we need to be mindful of. And really businesses, we need to actually understand these trends, how they interact with each other. When they collide with each other, what does it mean? For every challenge, there's always an opportunity. And by recognizing this and embracing many of the good practices, I think, you just need to relook at your whole business model, retweak your business strategy, and I think, you will be able to survive in the next century. So that's all I have, and I hope I have delivered to SPF Chairman's requirement of cutting short our presentation. Thank you.